North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. What do we do here? We report the news. Honestly, truthfully. We report the news. We analyze the news for fact and bias. I make commentary. That's not the news. Then we debate. That is the Wells Report, and I'm glad you're here to share it today on an eventful day where we might see the control of the House shift to Republicans. We will report that story if indeed it happens today. There are a lot of things happening in this country, and a lot of those things that happened in this country happened last night. One of them in particular, and that is the declaration of Donald Trump to be a candidate for the presidency in 2024. This is how it looked. That's the way it looked. Now, if I can just figure out, if I can figure out how to make it sound. For some reason, our sound is not working, and I don't know why. Now I do. Okay, so the reason is it wasn't working is because I didn't have the correct knob turned up. So let's go.
Nancy Pelosi has been fired. Isn't that nice?
Okay.
I told them, I said, if you just keep a little bit lower standard, you're going to have a big victory. They said, let's win by 40 seats. Let's win by 50. I said, if you win by 2 seats, be happy. But she's on her way to another country right now. She's been fired. But we always have known that this was not the end. It was only the beginning of our fight to rescue the American dream. And it's a word you don't use. 2 words. I don't want to be Joe. It's 2 words, American dream. That was not good what he did. There are a lot of bad things like going to Idaho and saying, welcome to the state of Florida. I really love it. In order to make America great and glorious again, I am tonight announcing my candidacy for President of the United States.
And so the former president formally put his hat into the ring to become president yet again. It has not happened before. It actually has happened before. Grover Cleveland was the first president to run for office and then run for office again. He is someone who has polarized the country in many ways. He has united the country in many ways. He had a spectacular presidency, some of that spectacle good, some of that spectacle not good. But President Donald Trump has decided to indeed throw his hat into the ring for the presidency of the United States. Fox News reported it this way. He punched hard at Democrats, skipped over GOP rivals, staying on message in a way strikingly different from his traditional rallies. President Trump spoke in a moment when many Republicans are distancing themselves from him after lackluster midterm elections for the party. GOP lawmakers, even traditionally supportive of Trump, hoped that he would delay an announcement until after the Georgia Senate runoffs, fearing his rhetoric could divide Republicans and drag down GOP candidate Herschel Walker. However, Trump's speech, in a subdued tone compared to his traditional campaign rallies, avoided intra-party sniping and denials of President Biden's 2020 election victory. There were no references to Ron DeSanctimonious, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, or other rivals that Trump has gone after as recently as the past few days on his Truth Social account. He said America's comeback begins right now. Trump told an enthusiastic crowd that included many members of his inner circle and at various points chanted Trump, Trump, and USA, USA. In order to make America great and glorious again, I'm announcing my candidacy for the presidency of the United States. He hit on many of his signature issues, including crime, drugs, illegal immigration. He also covered new ground, calling for congressional term limits, regulations on stock trading for federal lawmakers, and lobbying bans for former members of the cabinet and Congress. He slammed President Biden on his withdrawal from Afghanistan, alleging the current president made the U.S. a laughingstock. He also attacked President Biden for the U.S. assistance to Ukraine in a war against Russia. Quote, "Perhaps the most embarrassing moment in the history of the country," Trump said, referring to Afghanistan. "We lost lives, left Americans behind, and surrendered $85 billion of the finest military equipment anywhere in the world. Unlike Biden possibly getting us into World War III, which can seriously happen," President Trump said, "I will keep America out of foolish and unnecessary foreign wars." However, he painted an optimistic future for the United States if he is reelected. "I am running because I believe the world has not yet seen the true glory of what this nation can be. We will heal our divisions, bring our people back together through incredible success. We will shatter the forces of tyranny. We will unleash the glories of liberty for ourselves and our children and for generations yet to come. America's golden age is just ahead," said the president. Much of the Trump family was also there, and also with Trump loyalists, including Rick Grenell, Roger Stone, Tony Bobulinski, Mike Lindell, Jason Miller, Boris Epstein, and Devin Nunes. His family was there, including Melania, his children Eric and Barron, his daughter-in-law Laura, and his son-in-law Jared Kushner. President Trump's presidential announcement comes several months before modern White House candidates traditionally announce their presidential bids. The midterms are not even finished, with some House races uncalled and the Georgia runoff weeks away. President Trump also veered into some of his previous grievances. He griped that the media has not covered the success rate of his congressional endorsements in 2022. He also alleged that China interfered in the 2020 election. He attacked Christopher Steele and his discredited dossier, slammed the FBI raid of his home, and complained about subpoenas for members of his family. However, President Trump generally spent just a few seconds on those issues before getting back on message. He also attacked the use of mail-in ballots, but skipped the false stolen election claims that often comes when he addresses that topic. President Trump first won the presidency in 2016 against former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. If he is elected again, he would become only the second president to retake the White House after being ousted, a feat achieved by Grover Cleveland in 1892. Since his 2020 election loss to President Biden, Trump has challenged the legitimacy of the 2020 election results, repeatedly claiming the race was rigged due to COVID pandemic-era process of mail-in ballots. Trump's legal team filed a slew of lawsuits in battleground states around the nation. The former president was heavily involved in the midterms, throwing his support behind Republican candidates across the nation. During the primaries, the majority of Trump-endorsed candidates were victorious, but many of his most important endorsements struggled and lost in general elections, including candidates for senator and governor. This, by the way, does not point out the fact that President Trump made the point in his speech last night that indeed what had happened was, this particular report overlooks the fact that he has successfully elected some 200 of his endorsed candidates, 200 and more actually, and he had lost 20 seats. Yes, those were important seats that he lost, but the simple case of the matter is that there were a lot of election deniers that he endorsed that won far more than lost. And this is something that we're going to have to consider, and we will later on today on the Wells Report. And so he ignored his GOP rivals, and he did follow some things that I was talking about yesterday. I spent time with my assessment of what President Trump needed to do. He needed to be a statesman. He needed to stop referring to himself. He needed to start referring to the American people. He did both of those things. He also was someone who was quite different, and it was brought up in this report by Fox News. He was much more, shall we say, presidential than he has been in the past. He did descend into some sniping. Some of it was amusing. Some of it was right on the button, because he's a guy that does use humor when he feels like it's appropriate. He also uses humor when it's not appropriate. And these are the finer points that must keep President Trump has to keep at bay if he wants to be successful. I agree with many other pundits that say if President Trump sticks to the issues, if he sticks to his record, if he sticks to the things that are important to the people of the United States, he has a chance to win. If he does not, he will indeed fail. And so President Trump made a very good speech last night, an event that he called elegant and decided to keep it elegant, and he did. And I was very impressed with his speech. A lot of people wonder just exactly where my thoughts are from the standpoint of presidential politics in 2024. As this is still 2022, in November, in fact, what I will do is I will say the following. There are 4 candidates that I am very interested in spending a lot of time listening to and researching when it comes to Republican politics. There are 4. One of them is Ron DeSantis. Ron DeSantis is a guy that showed amazing political acumen, skill, and success in his campaign in Florida. The next is Mike Pence, the former vice president of the United States, a man who I say is one of the most professional, polished politicians that I have ever seen. He's incredibly good at being a politician. Can he be incredibly good at being a president? There's also Mike Pompeo. So far, this is the guy that leads the league for me. And the reason that I am paying so much attention to Mike Pompeo is because he does bridge the gap between politician and non-politician. His resume is even better than the best resumed president we've ever had, which was George H.W. Bush, who was essentially defeated because Ross Perot ran in his reelection campaign. And then there's President Donald Trump, who has a superb record of doing the things that made America very, very successful right before the COVID-19 infection. Now, all of these things come together for me in a decision-making process that I'm going to spend a lot of time on. I'm going to be very, very careful with my voting. It is true, I have voted for Donald Trump twice before. Will I vote for him again? I do not know. I'm going to wait and see. It's not because I, for whatever reason, want to disassociate myself from Donald Trump like many pundits have, like many people who do this job have. That's not the point. For me, it's about the debate. For me, it is about the issues that will come to the fore during the primary campaign. And these issues are essential for the United States of America. The successful solution of these and the successful execution of those solutions. That's what's most important to me. Will I vote for Donald Trump again? I don't know. Like I said, there are 4 candidates that I'm going to watch and research deeply. There may be other candidates that come up that I will give a strong look at. But at this particular moment, there are 4. So my vote for Donald Trump is not a foregone conclusion. I don't let loyalty get in the way of this nation. As a matter of fact, I don't let many things get in the way of this nation and what I think it needs to accomplish under a more beneficial government. More coming up in just a couple of moments. This is the Wells Report. Thanks for joining us. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number is 817-379-2172. President Trump has declared himself as a candidate for the 2024 presidential election. And I'm going to go to our chat room where you can also join the debate. It was a great debate yesterday. Everybody was so good and behaved themselves so well. It was a joy to actually share in. Let's say hello to Beth Ann from Indiana, who is watching today. Beth Ann, thanks very much for joining us. Beth thinks that the speech was kind of disappointing. It seemed weird. If President Trump has a chance to win, he's going to have to be more presidential. To be the bigger than life, outsized raconteur that won in 2016, that has got to change. Those cards have already been played. What we have now is we have to have a real president, someone who is a true leader of this nation. President Trump can do that. He can. But he's going to have to back away from the ideas and some of the things that he has thrown out at the feet of the American people. You know, I routinely talk about how the mainstream media spent 95% of their time trying to deride, degrade, shame, embarrass, humiliate the President Trump. And that is all real and true. But the president also added to his own pain by making these outsized and ill-advised statements. And he needs to get away from that. He can't do that any longer. He just can't. Let's see. So Beth said it was a disappointing speech. It's kind of weird. He's going to have to change his style. And frankly, I like this President Trump. I believe that he hit a very good balance. Poker Monkey says mail-in ballots are bad. Open it up for Democrats to cheat. Funny how they never worry about Republicans cheating with mail-ins and ballot harvesting. Well, that's because the Republican Party doesn't do it much. One of the things that is coming out of this election is whether or not the Republican Party can indeed engage in that level of electioneering. Will they move to ballot harvesting? Will they try to beat the Democrats at their own game? By the way, this is not a partisan statement. The Democrats freely admit and fight for ballot harvesting and a lot of the techniques and mail-in ballots and a lot of the techniques they've used to win or at least mitigate their losses and win one election and mitigate their losses in another. And so the thing is, will the Republican Party begin to follow suit? The problem with that is that degrades the entire political process for everyone. But then again, if that's the way the game is going to be played, then the Republicans had better start playing it. Let's see, everybody, please remember to like and share this link. Thank you very much, Yvonne. That's very, very nice. She's asking you to share the Wells Report link. Poker Monkey goes on to say, after this Biden disaster, we need a president to dig us out, a fighter who can get things done while beating down the left. DeSantis can likely do that. We know Trump can and has before. If President Trump incorporates some temperament in his statesmanship, he'll do well, says Gary. Trump could stick to his record in issues. He could win and then would be able to go haywire after, since he doesn't have to run again. That's true. He only has one more term as president. Like Grover Cleveland, there can be a break between his presidencies, but he only gets one more bite at the presidential apple. The Trump speech before the announcement was great. It was also very good afterwards. Then Gary talks about, and Beth talks about, Traitor Pence. Traitor Pence. And Gary says Pence is a Judas. No, I don't believe either of those are true. I will say this, however. Mike Pence is a professional politician. And that's what they do. That's one of the reasons why I'm looking at Mike Pence and saying, gee, I wonder if this is going to work. The reason is because he is a creature of the system, and he's very, very good at it. Do we need a polished president? Do we need a polished politician in the United States as the president? I'm not so sure. I think what we need an American. Somebody who believes the government should operate to the benefit of the American people instead of in spite of them. Can President Trump do that? Yes. Will he? We'll see. Back with more in a moment. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks again for being with us today as we think about and consider the third run for president that President Trump announced he would make last night. He has a lot of things to accomplish. He's accomplished a lot of things. When it comes to his presidency, we have a pretty good idea of what kind of president he would be. There were a couple of things here that we were talking about before the break, and that would be Traitor Pence and Judas Pence. Former Vice President Mike Pence is a polished politician, and I asked the question before we went on break whether or not we need a polished politician, someone who is a creature of the system, and he most assuredly is, or whether or not we need to, as the American people, find people who are outside that system. Outside the system is Mike Pompeo. Inside the system is Ron DeSantis. Inside the system is Mike Pence. Outside the system, but someone who wreaked havoc on the system, a disruptor, is President Trump. Mike Pence did say something that was very good. And Mike Pence said that, in his opinion, President Trump was the only person that could have defeated Hillary Clinton. There's a lot of truth in that statement. He also moved on to say that he believes that the country needs a new kind of leadership, a different kind of a leadership than we've had in the past, heading into 2024. Once again, a brilliantly polished political statement. Trump and DeSantis are really the only two that can get it done. I do not like Pence, and he has no chance. Pompeo would be okay, but he has no name recognition. We'll see, but that's a very good point. Beth said, things were much better before the plan fear. Gary said, my fault, I voted for Perot. That's when I learned vote for who can beat a Democrat, whether you like them or not. Okay, that's something that has been said many, many times. The great William F. Buckley, noted conservative, said this: vote for the most conservative candidate who can win. And that is, again, sage advice. Let's speculate about VPs for Trump or DeSantis. Noam, Scott, Lake, all. I don't think Scott is the guy for that job. I have my reservations about Mr. Scott. I'm sorry, not Scott. I'm sorry. I got him confused with the guy who was running against McConnell for Senate leadership, Rick Scott. There we go. And I guess Tim Scott, that would be a good choice. Rick Scott, not so much. Now Carrie Lake, I don't know. We'll see. Carrie Lake, I have a great deal of regard for. She's got guts. And she's also somebody that very clearly sees, or at least in her gubernatorial run, spoke very clearly about very clear things. She's very good at that. She's also a television person. She is a professional communicator. She would be polished and very good at that. By the way, I'm going through the chat room in case you're wondering. Let's see. Poker Monkey points out a third-party vote gets Democrats elected. It depends. If the Republican Party continues to try to distance themselves from President Trump, they are distancing themselves from most, if not all, 74 million votes that were cast for Trump last time. And so if President Trump finally gives up on the Republican Party, as I have already, then he may indeed be a third-party candidate, and he may indeed win. Trump must continuously press what things were like under his administration: low inflation, low gas prices, strong borders, peace, energy independence, and on and on. Let's see. It got codified in Michigan, so they'll continue to have boxes. What they're talking about are these, that's Jube, our superb publicist for the Wells Report, and you can find her at netmediaconsultants.com. Let's see, the only way Dems can win is cheat, and they're okay with that. Well, what they would say is they are very, very good at electioneering. And they are. They are very good at electioneering. They're also very good at portraying dishonesty as truth with their handmaiden, and that would be the mainstream media. Alan Schaefer, who is a Democrat who lives in Arizona. The U.S. has never been energy independent. Under Trump, the U.S. continued to import millions of barrels of oil per day, with 48% coming from Canada and 11% coming from Persian Gulf countries. That may be true. I don't know about the specifics on that. But on the other hand, let's talk a little bit more about what happened. Alan, I believe what happened under President Trump is that the United States entered the international oil market with a substantial amount of U.S. oil, which drove prices down. It's just simple economics there. I believe that the United States needs to do more of that, not less. Let's see, I don't believe that DeSantis is strong enough. Once again, we're going to see DeSantis is a serious guy. He is a serious guy and a very good considerer. He's someone you should consider. Alan Schaefer in 2018 says this. Let's see, Poker Monkey is replying to Alan Schaefer. In 2018, the U.S. exported more oil than we imported for the first time in 70 years. Poker also says the way to stay energy independent, as in most other aspects of life, is to get the government out of the way. Well, yes and no. You know, I believe that there is technology here in that is currently possessed by the human condition, the human endeavor, that can make oil wells invisible from a standpoint of how they are built and how they are run. And I believe that if you do that, and if you go out into nature and you drill for this oil, like for example on the North Slope in Alaska, it's possible to make these particular pieces of infrastructure all but invisible to people and the people and the animals around it. And I don't know that that's not a bad thing to push. What is ridiculous is to try to push the United States into an energy-starved nation when we have all the energy, quite literally, in the world. I suggest that what we do is we start using it. Poker also says in 2020, we produced more energy than we consumed, another milestone. All of the crazy green environmentalism that took over after President Biden came in is ruining us, along with cutting off our pipelines on day one. That was a mistake. Beth says that she feels like Pence disappointed everyone. He was a very, very good vice president. He was a very good vice president for President Trump. But once again, remember, don't get confused about Mike Pence. Mike Pence is running for president. He is very cautious and very careful about not ruining any kind of circumstance. And the press tries to lure him into it. Pence is a guy who is going to say things like, we need new leadership. He said that Trump was the only person that could defeat former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton. He's probably very correct. But we need a new kind of leadership. Once again, that very, very slick political communication. Let's see. The debates, Trump studied game films of Reagan. That's possible. Let's see. Norm Huckabee, DeSantis, Lake, probably for vice presidential candidates, perhaps. Carrie Lake lost. Election deniers were bigly losers, says Langston. Not correct. As a matter of fact, we're going to be touching on that a little bit later on in the Wells Report. Please stay tuned. Let's see what else. I loved Huckabee for the VP spot, but too bad she's taken. That's true. Kerry says he likes Carrie Lake. The Arizona election dragged out, and he believes that she was cheated. Pence did his job. Can't fault him for that, says Max Guadiano, my mentor and friend. Thank you so much for that comment. Let's see. Still going with that with no proof. That's what Ellen says. Okay, we'll see. Once again, let's see. Carrie Lake called John McCain a loser and told McCain supporters to go to hell. They returned the favor at the ballot box. That's according to Allen, who's a Democrat, and that's probably a good assessment. And then Isaac, who is also a Democrat, said, you guys keep putting your hopes in the former president who lost an election by over 70 electoral votes and 8 million in the popular vote. Yeah, well, I'm rather hoping that President Biden does run again, because I'm really interested in seeing if those 81 million votes show up again. Let's see what else. He endorsed candidates that lost throughout the midterms. Actually, he did not. Once again, we'll get in touch with that a little bit later on. Let's see. Mike Pence is slick. I don't trust him. Well, there's that. Pence also said January 6th was a tragic preventable event started by Trump. Well, that's one man's opinion. Let's see. Let's see who else. All of them know the most notable candidates. Yes. When we're talking about election deniers, yes, the big races were certainly lost by the president, but not as many as you think, and probably not as many as you wish. Let's see, the worst midterm result for the opposition party in recent history. That's not true. It's absolutely not true. The Democrats lost largely throughout the rest of the races around the country. And also, they did lose control of the House of Representatives. And that's something that is, while it wasn't the red wave everybody was talking about, it was certainly a successful election for the Republicans. See, I love that Mr. Trump spoke about making law for all the votes to be counted the same night of the election, which isn't that how it used to be? Yes, it is. Let's see what else. Isaac, I wonder if you supported Black Lives Matter and Antifa's mostly peaceful protests. I wonder why Republicans can't focus on the topic and always pivot to irrelevant issues. Well, it depends on your point of view, Isaac. It does. You know, there are great disparities in the difference between the people arrested and charged, and in some cases convicted, of miscreancy in the U.S. Capitol versus the number of people in the Black Lives Matter movement. There certainly was a difference in the way law enforcement was focused on those two different groups. And that's a fact. That is simply a fact. Now, the president, according to Time magazine, and this is touching on some of the non-political circumstances surrounding his 2024 candidacy. Time touches on it today. Former President Trump announced his third bid for the White House, confirming he's running to be the Republican Party's 2024 nominee, despite the web of criminal and civil investigations encroaching on him. Now, once again, that is biased reporting, but barely. Beyond speculation about Trump's chances in the primaries that are more than a year away, his candidacy raises questions about multiple investigations he remains embroiled in. Despite a decades-long career marked by lawsuits over contract disputes, employment issues, tax affairs, Trump has never faced the legal quagmire before him today. The Department of Justice has launched a criminal investigation into whether Trump allegedly removed or concealed potentially classified materials when he left office. That, by the way, that case is a non-starter. There is no way that they're going to be able to bring that case, or they would have already. And the reason is because of various moves done by the Department of Justice earlier, also involving people under similar circumstances. They simply can't do it, and they won't. They're going to try to figure out something else. Both the DOJ, if they do anything at all. And that's another reason, and that gets to the reason of this particular article. President Trump has declared his candidacy because all of the people that are chasing him legally, when it comes right down to it, will be affected by his candidacy. Legal experts tell Time that Trump's campaign announcement does not change the legal procedures or legal requirements of any of the investigations. Otherwise, anyone could simply announce they're running for president and get away with misconduct, says Barbara McQuaid, a professor at the University of Michigan Law School and a former U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Michigan. The Justice Department typically discourages investigative activities within 60 days of an election, and prosecutors are well outside that window. Such a policy wouldn't likely kick in until shortly before January 2024, when the first presidential primaries were held. That's what she says. Practically speaking, on the other hand, Trump's announcement could make investigators proceed more cautiously, said Stephen Binhock. He's a former federal prosecutor who served as an associate counsel during Ken Starr's investigations into former President Bill Clinton in the 1990s. When considering whether to bring charges against Trump, Attorney General Merrick Garland is now even more likely to weigh, quote, whether and how politics will affect the public perception of the fairness of the investigation and any charges, the likelihood that a jury will convict, how a judge would sentence Mr. Trump if there is a conviction, says Binhock. But Jennifer Rogers, a former federal prosecutor, a lecturer at Columbia Law School, says she thinks the DOJ has already approached its investigation into the former president with such considerations. He's already being treated with kid gloves, she says. They're being very cautious in the investigation. Rogers points out that while Trump hadn't formally announced his candidacy until last night, The former president has informally been viewed as a 2024 contender since his loss to Joe Biden 2 years ago. For these reasons, she says the announcement won't necessarily change the approach of the various probes. Well, I disagree. And when you say, well, anybody could just do that, etc., just declare they're running for presidency to forestall any kind of investigative activity, not everybody is President Donald Trump. Remember, he's a former president, and there are serious considerations. Further, I believe if the DOJ had a case that they felt they could win, they would have already indicted the former president, and they haven't done that yet. Now, they may do that as a political exercise, but how will they get away from the fact that indeed it looks like a political exercise? More in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. We're discussing President Trump and the implications of his candidacy for the 2024 presidential election. There are a lot of people that believe the president will be indicted. Okay, for what? I also believe that indeed, if the president was going to be indicted, it would have already happened. The point of the matter is not that. The point of the matter is, should this man be heard in the 2024 presidential election season? The answer is most assuredly yes. If the former president is statesmanlike, dare I say presidential, if he talks about the issues, if he talks about his experience and ability to get things done, he's got a real chance to win. But then again, I voted for him twice before, and he doesn't have my vote right now. I'm waiting. I'm waiting to see what other candidates come to the fore. Ron DeSantis obviously got the attention of the people of Florida, both Democrat and Republican. Also, Mike Pence, who is a very slick politician who almost never, I don't think I heard him make, I saw him make one bad move. In the entire time I've watched Mike Pence, I saw him make one bad move, and that's when he continually interrupted Kamala Harris during their debate. It was a mistake. He just needs to just let her talk. All you have to do with Kamala Harris to win a debate with her is just let her speak. That's all you have to do. And he should have known that. He should have stood back and essentially listened, and then when it was his turn, rebut what she said in the way that he eventually did. So DeSantis, Mike Pompeo is a guy who has the best resume for president since George H.W. Bush, and probably better. And I'm going to pay very close attention to what he has to say. But Donald Trump needs to be in the conversation, and also needs to be there to continue exposing the political machine that runs America. President Trump does that, has continually done that. We have learned things about our nation from President Trump that had nothing to do with his presidency. We found the depths of the swamp in Washington, D.C. And of all the things that President Trump has done to benefit this nation, that one may be the most beneficial. If only the American people will realize the threat that machine represents. We'll see. We will see. Let's see, Isaac Tate, for what? Removing top secret documents? Top secret documents, like Hillary Clinton. Yeah, that's a no-go. Election fraud? What election fraud? What election fraud? Lying about the documents and the locations. Well, we don't know anything about that. That's an assumption on your part. Let's see, Trump supporters are like those characters from the Titanic. The ship is sinking, but you guys are still playing your instruments. Well, okay, so what's the issue there? Let's see, what else? Trump is not going to be president again. If the GOP is dumb enough to nominate him, it will ensure a Democrat stays or is elected to the highest office in the land. Okay, Alan, who would that be? Who is that president going to be? Who is the Democrat president that's going to be the person that essentially defeats the Republicans, no matter who they nominate? Who is it? Put a name out there. But the point of this conversation, the point of this discussion at this particular moment, is President Trump should indeed be in the mix. I want to see what the other candidates do to refute that president. And there is something else. Remember that all the detractors that say all these negative things about President Trump are talking about President Trump. They're not talking about the issues. And these people that are here on the chat room, that are essentially trying to derail the conversation, they're still talking about President Trump. They're not talking about the realities. They're not talking about where this country needs to go. It's fascinating. These are the same people that will say that someone who supports President Trump is looking backward, and yet they do the same thing. I'm looking forward. I'm looking to 2024. I'm looking to the debate. I am looking to see where all this lands. That's what I'm looking for. And Alan Schaefer, who is from Arizona and is a Democrat, says anybody who is not named Donald Trump, that's who is going to be the Democrat candidate who will defeat Donald Trump. Really? So you can't put a name out there, can you? Because there isn't anybody left, is there? Joe Biden is not going to run. If he does, he's going to have a hell of a lot of explaining to do why 81 million votes became somewhere in the 60 million range. How is he going to lose 20 million votes? Who else? Who else would you put up there, Alan? You don't have anybody. You don't have anybody in the Democrat Party that could get elected president. You don't. Gavin Newsom of California? No. Doesn't have a chance. Who else? I'm interested. He embarrassed the office, lied about COVID, wrecked the economy before leaving office. Isaac, are you talking about President Trump, or are you talking about President Biden? Because President Biden embarrassed the office, lied about COVID, and has wrecked the economy while he's in office. Once again, Julian Castro, Wesley Moore. Oh, let's have a conversation about those guys. This is the Wells Report. We'll have hour number 2 coming up in just a moment. Thanks very much for joining us. Back in a moment. Okay. Yeah, Julian Castro? Sure. Absolutely. Not a chance. Okay, let's see you in a minute. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. What do we do here? We report the news, honestly, truthfully. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point out both. I make commentary. That's not the news. That's just my opinion, just as valuable as yours. And that is why we debate. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. That's what you find on the Wells Report. We've been talking about President Trump. He declared for the presidency in 2024 yesterday. There's been a lively conversation on the chat room, which you can avail yourself of anytime you choose. Go to Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. If you're on Rumble or if you're on Patreon, this show was recorded earlier today, and you're watching that. And it would be great to hear from you. You can send me an email at thewellsreport@frontier.com. The Wells Report, all one word, all lowercase. The Wells Report at frontier.com. By all means, share what you think. In the subject line, please put the platform that you're watching this on so I know it's you. So last hour, we were talking about the fares of election deniers in the election. Stephen Beard wrote a thoughtful article about that, and it opens like this. An October analysis by the USA Today Network profiled election-denying candidates on the November ballot in 7 swing states, won by President Joe Biden in 2020. So this is not a complete picture, but it does show an interesting trend. The president himself said that in his endorsement campaign during the midterms, over 200 candidates that he endorsed won. Did he lose high-profile races? He most certainly did. Is that telling? Perhaps. The most telling, I think, is the gubernatorial race in Arizona, where Kari Lake was attacking the Arizona elections because her opponent was the Secretary of State who oversaw those elections. So a lot of her election denying had to do with A, Arizona, and B, had to do with what are definite shortcomings in the Arizona election system. Florida had similar problems. In 2000, they solved them, and they essentially led the entire nation when it came to handling their election this time around. Arizona needs to do something similar. So keep that in mind when you're talking about Kari Lake. Okay? She is an election denier. There's no doubt about it. She is also a very strong advocate for and ally of President Trump. Okay, is that something that is negative in some people's minds? Absolutely. Did it cost her the election? That remains to be seen. Nationwide, there were hundreds of candidates for lower offices who denied the outcome of the 2020 presidential election. The investigation focused on candidates vying for governor, U.S. House, U.S. Senate, Secretary of State, and Attorney General because of the influence they would have over future elections. So these are the caveats of this particular report. 46 candidates for these offices in the 7 states, representing 84 electoral votes, have publicly supported for former President Donald Trump, and the fact that he claims that the election was stolen. So, how did candidates from the October analysis fare in Tuesday's general election? Here's a summary of 46 candidate outcomes. In Arizona, 4 election deniers won, 4 election deniers. Those races are yet to be decided. In Georgia, 7 election deniers won. 1 is still up for grabs. In Michigan, 3 election deniers won. 4 failed. In Nevada, 2 failed. 1 is still up for grabs. In New Mexico, all election deniers failed. In Pennsylvania, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 won and 2 lost. In Wisconsin, 3 won and 1 lost. That is hardly an overwhelming condemnation of those people who indeed denied the 2020 election and ran for office. Now, so far, just counting the people that won, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. 24 won elections. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 lost. That's a winning percentage, especially when you consider that there are 6 races that have yet to be called. And those are in a very narrow group of candidates in swing states. The vast majority of those election deniers won those elections. Vast majority. As a matter of fact, President Trump said he only lost 20 of those races. Were they important ones? Absolutely they were. And by the way, do I believe in election denying? Absolutely not. I do not. Are there questions that are unanswered about the 2020 election? Yes, there are. Are they still unanswered 2 years hence? Yes, they are still unanswered. Do they matter? Probably not. Time to look forward. But we also have to ask ourselves a different question. There is no doubt about the fact that election engineering efforts by the Democrat Party, those efforts are successful. Mail-in ballots, ballot harvesting, those things are successful. Let me ask you this question. Do we want to see more of that or less of that? Forget the parties. Just talk about the gaming of the system. Do we want to see more gaming of the electoral system or less? Now, there are an awful lot of people that say, hey, wait a minute. If you can game the system, do it. But do we want to see more of that in our national elections or less of it? I'm not going to answer the question. I want you to. I want you to answer those questions. Do we want to see? I think what we saw, if not cheating, is certainly, shall we say, not preferable. Let's put it that way. I'll be Mike Pence for a moment. I don't want to see more ballot harvesting. I want to see less. I don't want to see mail-in ballots that are counted after the election. I want to see less. I want to see all those votes that are cast counted on election day. That's what I want to see. I don't want to see these continual counts that always seem to turn out with Democrat winners. I don't want to see that. I want to see, and I said I wasn't going to talk about policy, or politics rather, or parties. I don't want to see somebody who is behind in the election after a protracted election process end up on top because of ballots that are clearly not ballots cast by real people in real polling places during real elections. I want to see people actually showing up at the polls. There are a lot of states. Arizona is one of them. Arizona is one of them that have historically used mail-in ballots. But what we've seen here in this is that can be exploited. And that is a bipartisan assessment. It is simply a bipartisan assessment. And I want to see less of it. What do you think? I just said I wasn't going to answer the question, but I did. I want to see less of it. I want to see honest voting, which is not to say that voting that's currently happening is dishonest. I believe that a large majority of mail-in ballots are just fine, absolutely fine. But this ballot curing, this idea that you can go back after you've cast your ballot and change it in any way is a mistake. And we have to get away from it in this nation. If you're going to be a voter, 1, you should be a registered voter. 2, you should be able to prove that you are a registered voter. In other words, voter ID. And 3, you need to do the stewardship necessary to cast a successful ballot. That's part of the American system. Self-governance requires self-discipline. There are times, and I hate to say this, but sometimes you just have to read the directions and you have to follow them. And so that's what I believe needs to happen. Interested in your responses? We'll get to those in just a couple of moments. But please understand that President Trump had a far better endorsement season than any other politician in the United States. Period. And that's not being reported honestly. And that is also something we have to change. We have to have honest news and honest reporting. It's one of the reasons why you're here. You're here for that exact cause, for that exact reason. My politics are conservative. They are not Republican. My North Star is the Constitution and Bill of Rights. I believe that everything should run through that lens as opposed to a Republican or Democrat one. We have to have that. We have to be clear-eyed in our political choices. By the way, there was a lengthy piece in CNN. One last point before I move on. There was a lengthy piece in CNN regarding the lies or mistruths or what have you that President Trump told during his speech. It's there on CNN.com. You can see it. Okay. I haven't spent a whole lot of time with it. I did check this, however. In all the things that they mentioned in that article, not one of them dealt with election deniers being elected or the number of endorsed candidates that won versus the number of endorsed candidates that lost. They didn't even touch it. And as I said before, if election denying candidates were drubbed at the polls, it would be front page news, but it isn't. And even this very well thought out article does put a series of constraints that even with those constraints cannot deny a winning record of those people who deny elections. Now, again, am I putting a feather in my cap and wandering around and strutting? No, I'm not. Because I think it's sad that election deniers could win. But the people of the United States, and I would dare say a majority of them, have serious concerns about the electoral process in this nation. And that's something that cannot be denied. Probably a majority. And I'm saying we need to fix this because we can. Why don't we? Is it because it serves the interests of a political party over another? Sure. Is that just good electioneering? Most assuredly. But once again, I want to see less of that. I want to see less of that, and I want to see more honest ballot counting. And the way you can do it is structural. Count all the ballots. Mail-in ballots, count them when they come in. Don't come up with tranches and tranches of votes after the fact. If people want to mail in their ballot, it's their responsibility to get it there by Election Day so they can be counted on Election Day. That's one of the great things about an honest election. You see, if you already know most of the results on Election Day and then keep counting ballots, you'd have to be nuts not to doubt the outcome. You'd have to be. Or you just have to be willingly nuts or actually nuts. Remember, the problem is politicians. That's the problem. The problem is politicians. And we need to start electing ourselves. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. There's a chat room that you can avail yourself of. Please do. Let's go through a few things on that chat room. Isaac says to me, "You are so into Trump." No, I am so into America. I am so into America. I voted for Donald Trump twice because what I saw him do was truly American leadership. That's what I saw. Am I going to vote for him again? As I've said on this broadcast more than once, not necessarily. If he's the best candidate, if he's the most American presidential candidate, I will likely vote for him. But he's got real competition this time. And I made it very plain. Old Trump is not going to win. It has to be a new Trump. It has to be a presidential Trump. It has to be a guy that doesn't snark. It has to be a guy that points to realities, points to issues, offers solutions. And that's true for anybody else that I would cast my vote for. Does President Trump, in my view, does President Trump need to be in this conversation? Absolutely he does. He's the last Republican president with a chance to win. He's the last Republican president that has a chance to win this election. I want to hear what he has to say. So, no, not into Trump. I'm into America. Let's see, there are no federal, Yvonne points out that there are no federal voting laws. Those are created and monitored state by state. Correct. Please don't think that when I say that we have to have elections that actually work like Florida's did, for example. And believe me, Democrats can win in those races. They did, by the way. Not many, but they did. Yeah, those have to be state decisions, and I'm not for federal elections. Even when federal offices are up for grabs, I am not, absolutely not, into federal election law. Let's see, who else? I asked who a great candidate for the Democrat Party would be, and my dear friend from, okay, you're old, Arthur, 50 years ago, said Michelle Obama. Michelle Obama has a chance. Michelle Obama is different than her husband. Not much, but different. And one of the things that concerns me about Michelle Obama, aside from what I would consider to be hard progressive politics, is the fact that I believe that it would be the third Obama term, as if President Biden's term wasn't. But what I would say is that that's something that she would have to overcome. She'd have to lead of her own volition. And I'd very much be interested in what she had to say. I think that's a great candidate choice for the Democrat Party. Let's see, 61% of Americans don't want Trump to run before the midterms. Okay. How many Americans believe that the country's on the wrong track, and how many people don't want President Biden to run? The answer is most of them. Let's say they say the fourth time is the charm. That's good, Mike. Let's see, replying to Lois Floyd, she won't, but I think she would beat Trump. I think that she would give him a hell of a run. And not just President Trump. Anybody who runs for the Republican Party, Michelle Obama would give them one hell of a run and might even win. Someone explain why Democrats want high inflation, high taxes, high gas prices, no borders, high crime rates, etc. That's the conversation I want to hear. I want to hear Democrats answer those questions. I do. See what else. If Biden chooses not to run, there are plenty of qualified people who could throw their hats into the ring. Okay, who? I want to know who. I want to know who that actually I want to know which Democrats have an actual chance to win the presidency. Okay? And once again, Alan is evasive. Well, that's over a year away, and I'm going to worry about that later next year. How convenient. Isaac descends into putting down Donald Trump. I'm not interested. Let's see. Heck, an old guy with a habit of gaffes and incorrect statements bests Trump. Michelle Obama is at a higher level of sharpness. Indeed. Let's see who else. What else we got? Did the guy in charge of the Maricopa election also start a pact to get rid of MAGA candidates? Why, yes, he did, says Jew. Back with more in a moment. This is the Wells Report. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Feel free to call. Isaac's the only one who ever calls on a regular basis. Feel free to call. Let's talk. If you want to get into the chat room, you can. There's the last couple of days, the chat room has been amazingly good. I want to thank everybody who puts their thoughts on, it's not paper, but certainly writes them down. Alan Schaefer brought up something that I said, was it last week? I think I said something about if you look at a map of how people voted in the United States, the vast majority of that is red. And Alan rightly points out the whole map is not red coast to coast. Land does not vote. Livestock does not vote. Okay, that's true. But remember, when we're talking about national elections, what we're talking about is the United States of America, not the Federal Republic of America. And if you are a Democrat election devotee, and you apparently are, which is okay, you got to point out that there are very small slivers of Democrat power in places where there are lots and lots of people in these days living very difficult lives with crime, inflation, energy costs, and on and on. And what somebody needs to in the Democrat Party, what they need to do is they need to try to fill in some of those red areas, and they are immense. And remember, the Electoral College ensures that every state gets a say in national elections, at least for the president. And so keep that in mind. But that's a good point. Land does not vote. Correct. Let's see what else. The problem with the Republican side of American elections and our demise, the Republican Party demise, is we play by the rules. Democrats are okay with cheating. That's kind of a harsh statement. Let me say this, Gary. Is it cheating or is it smart? These people see openings and they take them. Is that cheating? I'm not so sure. Alan points out that non-citizens, including permanent legal residents, cannot vote in federal, state, and most local elections. And yet they do, Alan, don't they? The other thing is this. We are seeing a huge number of all the trends I've seen in the elections lately, the huge number of races that are won and lost by 10,000 votes or less. Everybody says there's no appreciable voter fraud. Doesn't have to be. We're only talking about 10,000 votes in an entire state. Come on. Let's see. Let's continue. JD, you are selecting an article that focused on a few elections. Yeah, that's true. But it was by USA Today. USA Today is biased. You know it as well as I do. USA Today is biased, and yet they couldn't tell a more evocative story. Believe me, election deniers had their day in this election. The vast majority of them had their say. And the fact-checking in CNN when the president said over 200 of my endorsees won, 20 lost. Big losses. Don't get me wrong. Big losses. But of the people he endorsed, over 200 of them won. That's a lot of political power. That's a lot of political power. What was the result of the 300 deniers I cited? One was President Trump and the other was USA Today. Let's see what else. Replying to Arthur Davenport, Mark Greer, someone who isn't hard right, just a classic moderate who knows how to negotiate when it's beneficial for the country. Well, that's the Republican Party. They don't fight for the United States. They negotiate with Democrats. That's the big problem with the party. Let's see, with appropriate safeguards, mail-in ballots are secure. Okay. What are the appropriate safeguards, and do you think they exist now? I don't believe so. Let's see. Michelle Obama has repeatedly said she's not running for elective office. Drop it. I'm reporting the news, Alan. There are people that say that Michelle Obama would be one hell of a candidate. I have my own opinion. She's one hell of a candidate. She absolutely is. And once again, I keep coming back to you. If not Michelle Obama, then who? Who does the Democrat Party have? Remember, you're talking about trying to win in 2024. Michelle Obama, right now, the way I see it, your very best bet, whether she wants to run for office or not. That's what I'm saying. Let's see. The Democrats have Gavin Newsom. He doesn't have a chance. He does not have a chance. Let's see. Musk said it best. He's going to buy Dominion and incorporate it into Tesla. Then he could have 100 vehicles built and wake up to 160. That's funny. Okay. I'm not crapping on Dominion. I'm not. But what happened in Maricopa County? Okay. It's not just Dominion. It's this computerized voting system jazz. Okay. I'm just saying we need to get back to pencils and paper. We can do that. Let's see. Gavin Newsom, time to invade and occupy California. Well, all right. There you go. Let's see. Lois Floyd on Michelle Obama. She is awful. Remember when she stated she had no love of this country? That's true. Absolutely true. But once again, I'll ask you the same question I asked Alan. Who is the best? Who is the best Democrat candidate today? It's Michelle Obama. Let's see here. Let's see. Drop it in the sense of Michelle Obama not running for office. She's not a possible candidate. We'll see. We'll see. I'll remember you said that, Alan, like many other things. Once again, if you're snarky about me saying that Michelle Obama is a great candidate, how about this? Name another one. You just won't do it, will you? Why? Argue with me but not provide a choice? Why? Come on, man. Let's be Americans together. What do you say? Now, while I've been ragging on the fortunes of Democrats, let me rag on the fortunes of Republicans. There was an op-ed piece that I sort of glanced over that said Republicans don't learn anything from the midterms. True. Senator Mitch McConnell will continue in his role as Senate Minority Leader for another session of Congress after his re-election to the post today. He beat his only challenger, Rick Scott of Florida, in a secret vote, and it wasn't even close. 8 days past Election Day, not clear which party will control the House of Representatives, with the Republican Party 1 seat away from gaining a majority. And let's see what else. Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell emerged triumphant from the vote, in which he won 75% of the tally. I'm not going anywhere. That's really too bad. That's really too bad. He's been the Republican leader since 2007 and didn't say a word during the midterms. And what he did say was deleterious to Republican candidates. We just don't have the kind of candidate quality we need. Yeah? Well, sitting next to you in the chamber, Senator McConnell, will be a man with a broken brain. And by the way, that man with a broken brain, probably a nice guy. I'm not denigrating himself personally. I'm just saying his brain is broken. Okay? So who was campaigning for John Fetterman? President Obama. You thought General Bolduc was a terrible candidate? Okay. Why weren't you standing there with him? I'll tell you why. Because you don't want to win. Mitch McConnell is a loser. He's just a loser. Senate Republicans voted to keep Senator Mitch McConnell as the top GOP lawmaker. Also reselected John Thune, the Republican from South Dakota, as second in command. John Barrasso of Wyoming as GOP conference chair. Of those three, John Barrasso's okay. But I got to tell you, I'm not impressed with McConnell or Thune. And those of you who are Republicans who believe that the party is going to change appreciably to actually confront what America needs, not so much. Missouri Senator Josh Hawley, who voted for Rick Scott in that leadership election in the Senate, told reporters after the meeting that the disappointing result of last week's midterm election is reason enough for a change. Quote, so we had independent voters that voted for Obama and then voted for Trump who disapproved of Joe Biden. A sizable number of them stayed home rather than vote for the Republican candidates. My view is that's why you look across these elections. That's why there wasn't a red wave. There wasn't a red wave because the Republican Party did not put out any real policy solutions. What are their plans? I'm busting on Allen to come up with a Democrat candidate for president in 2024. I'm busting on you to come up with something. I want to see policies that the Republican Party will actually get behind and do something about. Instead of, well, we just aren't going to have a big enough majority in the House to pass these things. So we're probably going to have to set aside this idea of these policy ideas that I put back to, okay, whatever. That's right. You're still Republicans. By the way, the vote for Senate leadership was 37-10. Outrageous. Absolutely outrageous. Let's see. And then they keep talking about that, and they keep talking about that, and they keep talking about that. Mitchell, by the way, they also, when it comes to the balance of power, they also decided to keep McCarthy as their House leader, who will very likely be the Speaker of the House. And Kevin McCarthy, once again, no leadership changes at the top. All right, there you go. That's really fantastic. What is the state of play in some of these other races? We've been doing this every day. I want to do it now. Let's go to the result. Okay, in Maine, they implemented a ranked choice voting system following a statewide referendum in 2016. Incumbent Democrat Jared Golden failed to reach 50%, currently leading former Republican Congressman Bruce Poliquin. And that is the second round tabulation is scheduled for Tuesday, November 15th. Somehow I recall that it was going to be today, but let's move on. In the California 3rd, Kevin Kiley, the Republican, holds a commanding lead over Democrat Kermit Jones. However, approximately only a little half of the ballots have been counted in the likely Republican race. California can't count the ballots, just can't get them done. California 13, toss-up race. Tightest remaining is Republican John Duarte narrowly leads Democrat Adam Gray by less than 800 votes. There's no problem with election fraud, is there? Oh, no. No. I mean, the guy's leading by 800 votes. Seriously? In another tight race, incumbent Republican Representative David Valadao leads Democrat challenger Rudy Salas by more than 3,000 votes. No problem with election fraud, and no appreciable election fraud. Why is there any election fraud? I'm just asking. Incumbent Republican Mike Garcia holds a commanding lead over Democrat challenger Christy Smith in the California 27th by a little more than 13,000 votes. That's getting back to reality. Incumbent Democrat Representative Katie Porter leads Republican challenger Scott by less than 3,000 votes in the toss-up race. That's the California 47th. The California 49th toss-up race currently has incumbent Democrat Representative Mike Levin leading Republican challenger Brian Marriott by 13,000 votes. Colorado 3rd, Lauren Babert, not expected to have such a close race with her Democrat opponent, Adam Frisch, in the likely Republican seat. The one-term Congresswoman is leading the vote count by a little more than 1,000 votes. Mail-in ballots from state and overseas service members can arrive as late as today. As long as they were postmarked by Election Day, we might know by the end of the week. But it looks like the Republicans will indeed take control of the House of Representatives. But I have to tell you, I got to be honest. The simple case of all this is these leadership elections by the Republican Party. Either you're giving up on these other Republican races or you just don't care. And if you just don't care and you're giving up on these other races, then why are you in power? Mitch McConnell is a loser. He's got a demonstrated record of loss. Why is he still running the show? Why? I mean, he was the Republican leader. He was the Senate leader, the leader of the Senate of the United States, and lost it. Why? Because he's a loser. That's why. The Republican Party at large. Losers. Certainly the leadership. Republicans don't want to win. The Republican leaders do not want to win and lead this nation. Get out of the way. get out of the way of people who do. I like Tom Hawley. I'm not real happy about Rick Scott, but I like Tom Hawley. I like Ted Cruz. I like Marco Rubio. Although Marco Rubio can play the political game with the best of them. And once again, I'm not real interested in politicians winning these things. I'm interested in us winning these things, because when we win, we win. And we need a government that operates to the benefit of the people of the United States, not to the benefit of the political parties. We can't agree on that, right? This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Let's see. Cornyn stepped down. Yeah, apparently. I think he's retiring. I think he is. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back in 3 minutes. 3 Mike. Don't move. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Our telephone number 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Thanks very much for being with us today. There's some other things going on here. By the way, Alan said Pete Buttigieg would be a great presidential candidate for the Democrat Party in 2024. Why? I'd love to know. Let's see. Senator Chris Murphy said he was frustrated over Secretary of Treasury Janet Yellen's claim there was no basis to investigate billionaire Elon Musk's purchase of Twitter. Yellen made claim that there was no basis to investigate Musk's acquisition of Twitter after Murphy, the senator, Chris Murphy, wrote the cabinet secretary a letter arguing they should probe the purchase. Harlow said there was a huge investment from Saudi Arabia and other nations. Okay. You going to go after Texaco Mobile or what? There are an awful lot of corporations in the United States that are indeed invested in by Saudi Arabians. Are we going to go after all of that, Senator Murphy? I don't think so. Here's what the senator said. I don't understand Secretary Yellen's decision not to inquire about the circumstances of this massive foreign investment in an American media company. It's 11%. That's how much Saudi Arabia has invested in Twitter. That's hardly a voting majority. CFIUS, C-F-I-U-S, the committee that reviews foreign investment in American companies, was set up for this exact situation, where a foreign government has made an investment in very important media companies, perhaps with the intent of affecting American politics or getting access to Americans' data. Strange, he would bring up Twitter, but not TikTok. We'll be talking about TikTok a little bit later on. He said while the Saudi company had its investment in Twitter before Musk purchased the site, almost everybody else cashed out when Musk paid a price for Twitter that was way above valuation. You do realize that Mr. Senator, you do realize that Elon Musk was working very, very hard to reduce the price because he thought that many of the things that he was buying didn't exist. You know, this is politics writ large. And once again, politics is not serving the people of the United States. What's happening is that they're very concerned that there might be something as large as Twitter that was actually in the hands of somebody who believes in free speech. Why is that? Well, because Twitter truly helped in the election process. Everybody's worried about these other countries interfering in the American election process. Let me ask you this question. Who interferes the most in American elections? Do you know? Do you know? The mainstream media. They're biased. They try to affect the elections every single day. They are the number one election warpers in the United States. They have far more influence on the elections than they should. We should report the story. I know you can. I do it every day. I report fairly on this broadcast. I just do. Alan Schaefer goes, I was in the chat room and I said that McConnell should be known as McLoser. Yeah, he's a loser. And once again, the reason I point that out is because the Republican Party doesn't want to lead. They just don't. You know, they don't want to have control. They don't want to push their agenda. What they want to do is negotiate with Democrats. That is my assessment of the Republican Party. In order to do that, Alan, you have to lose elections. And that is exactly what Mitch McConnell did in the Senate. They could be sitting on a Republican majority if he'd just gotten off his duff and started campaigning for people that he thinks, well, just didn't have the sufficient quality. What are you talking about? What are you talking about, Senator McConnell? I mean, look at all the people that are elected as Democrat senators. Okay? Come on. I mean, you can start right there with the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris. You know, she was Kamala Harris before she was a senator. And she was Kamala Harris before she became the vice president. All right? I'm just saying. Kamala Harris is a known quantity. Kamala Harris? Seriously? We just had a conversation about who should run for the presidency in 2024. Kamala Harris's name didn't come up once. Nobody said a word. Nobody. And so there's that. Let's see. The Democrats are frustrated by that. One last thing here. I want to point this out. I said yesterday that Jay Leno got fired. It's not that he lost his job. He actually got set on fire. Jay Leno's doctor today gave an update on the comedian's health. His injuries are serious. His condition is good. He suffered significant burns to his face and his hands, as well as his chest. while working underneath a car in Burbank, California. This, according to Dr. Peter Grossman. Since he's been in the hospital, the comedian has undergone one surgery, has another one planned for later this week. Those are skin grafts, likely. The surgery was a surgical excision. There we go. And grafting procedure. There you go. He did well in that surgery. He's in good spirits today. That's because of the pain medication they're giving him. It's really hard to be down in the dumps when you're high. Let's see. He suffered deep second-degree and possibly third-degree burns in the car fire. Both injuries are progressive and dynamic. It's hard to predict the final outcome at this stage in the game, but he expects Leno to make a full recovery. This is the Wells Report, hour number 2 in the books. We're bringing hour number 3 in just a minute. Thanks for joining us today. God bless all y'all. Thanks so much, especially in the chat room today. Really appreciate it. Have yourself a good one. I'll see you for hour number 3. North to south, coast to coast, around the world. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. My name is John David Wells. How's it going? What do we do here? We report the news honestly, truthfully, fairly. We examine the news. We analyze the news for fact and bias. We point that out. I make commentary, not the news. Commentary is just my opinion on this broadcast, just as valuable as yours, and that leads to debate. News, analysis, commentary, and debate. It's the Wells Report. As we come to this, the FBI Director, Christopher Wray, who, by the way, has an impossible job left to him by his predecessors, that of a political organization disguised as a federal law enforcement agency. He's having a tough time because he does have to deal with politicians in his life, specifically the House Homeland Security Committee this time around. And what he came up with was this: China has stolen more personal and business data from Americans than all other nations in the world combined. He made his comments during a hearing with the House Homeland Security Committee in Washington. This, by the way, reported by Fox News. Wray says China has an expansive hacking program targeting U.S. citizens, went on to say that Chinese apps like TikTok represent significant data threats. China's vast hacking program is the world's largest. They have stolen more Americans' personal and business data than any other nation combined. Than every other nation combined. There you go. He explained the dangers posed by TikTok, a massively popular video sharing app owned by the Chinese tech giant ByteDance. Dangers include the possibility that the Chinese government could use it to control data collection on millions of users or control the recommendation algorithm, which could be used for influence operations if they chose to, or control software on millions of devices, which gives them the opportunity to potentially tactically compromise personal devices. But then again, so does Google. So does Facebook. So does Twitter. So do all of these organizations. And and I'm going to say this plainly, the number one thief of Americans' personal information and intellectual property is not China. It's America. America, for reasons that I have yet to figure out, what they do is they say, you know, everything you put on an electronic device belongs to us, and they collect it. I mean, when it comes down to personal information, the United States government is someone that is an entity that I believe oversteps their congressional mandate and their constitutional mandate to collect information on us. You're not supposed to be able to do that without a warrant. It's that Fourth Amendment thing. Secure in your houses, your persons, your papers, and effects. Come on. But yet the American government has no problem doing it, and whenever the subject comes up, they point at China. Oh yeah, China. Now make no mistake, I'm not happy with China either. They were able to penetrate the United States government and get all the data of everybody who has ever filled out any paperwork requesting a security clearance. They got my information. But then again, so does the U.S. government. Come on, let's be real here, okay? I had to point that out. It's just something you have to do. Wray's statement comes weeks after FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr called for the U.S. to outright ban TikTok, arguing efforts to separate the U.S.-based branch from its headquarters in China were pointless. Quote, I don't believe there's a path forward for anything other than a ban, he told Axios, adding that there isn't a world where you could come up with a sufficient protection on the data that you could have sufficient confidence that it's not finding its way back into the hands of the CCP. Okay. You know, one of the things about this is every single person who is engaged in TikTok, excuse me, is doing so voluntarily. I mean, think about that for just a couple of minutes. The data being stolen from Americans by America is done involuntarily. I mean, I'm sorry. If I wrote a letter to somebody, put it in an envelope, there are laws in the United States that forbid anyone opening it. It's against the law. It's against federal law. And yet, if you put it down, the coin of the realm of communication in the United States, emails, texts, phone calls, every single one of those is gathered, if not monitored, by the United States government. And nobody's forcing people to join TikTok. The United States government is forcing everybody to give up their personal data every single day. I used to be really worried about that, by the way. I used to have a real problem with it. I was very careful in my communications online. And then I realized there's no privacy. And they even made as a matter of fact, the former director of the FBI, since we're talking about FBI directors, the former director of the FBI says he didn't believe that Americans should have secrets from the government. Excuse me? Excuse me? Seriously? He said that out loud when the Fourth Amendment absolutely guarantees, as a God-given right, that we can have secrets from the government. What I say, what I text, what I write in an email is none of the government's business. But we've got to point out TikTok, my God, TikTok. TikTok. Okay, well, once again, it's voluntary. TikTok is voluntary. If you don't like TikTok, don't let your kids use it. I mean, are some of these things real and true and concerning? Absolutely. But I'm not really worried about people trying to influence American elections. The number one influencer of American elections is the mainstream media, which is biased left, period. I mean, just let's put it out there where it belongs. TikTok pushed back on Carr in a statement on Fox Business, arguing that the commissioner has no role in discussions with the CFIUS. FCC has no authority to regulate TikTok, which is why Carr and others critical of the Chinese apps have urged other federal agencies and Congress to take action. Commissioner Carr, that's Brendan Carr of the FCC, has no role in confidential discussions with the United States government related to TikTok and appears to be expressing views independent of his role as FCC commissioner, said TikTok. We are confident that we're on a path to reaching an agreement with the U.S. government that will satisfy all reasonable national security concerns. Yeah, whenever we get stuff that is a national security concern, we just won't look at it. And we won't have anything to do with it. We'll just throw it in the cosmic waste bin. Wrong answer. That access, let's see, TikTok representatives insist the use of users' data is safe. Executives for the company have admitted under oath the data is accessible from China. Okay. That access is used frequently as well, as was revealed in an extensive report from BuzzFeed earlier this year. BuzzFeed, as if they were a reliable source. The outlet obtained audio for more than 80 internal meetings at TikTok showing U.S. employees were not permitted to access user data and instead relied on Chinese employees to do so. The Americans can't look at this, but Chinese employees can. It's so ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous. All right, but I thought you'd like to know. Yeah, USA Today. That, by the way, was Fox News. USA Today says says Christopher Wray is very concerned, extremely concerned. Beijing could weaponize data collected through TikTok. Yeah, that horse is out of the corral, guys, and we need to get him back in. And that begins at home. You see, I'm not a big believer in curtailing communication. I'm really not. I'm even less of someone who believes that say, for example, the American government should have anything to do with any of it. It's none of their business. Okay, so TikTok is a national security threat, according to our government. Put it out there and say, I think this is a national security threat. Please don't take part in TikTok. Okay. End of government involvement. End of government involvement. And it chaps me in bad spots that this government, who seemingly was available to Chinese espionage to get everybody's data from the government personnel offices, is complaining about TikTok. You got no leg to stand on. But then again, I suppose if you're talking about TikTok, you don't have to talk about the border. You don't have to talk about lying to the FISA court. You don't have to talk about the political warpage of the FBI. You don't have to talk about any of that stuff. This is piteous. It's absolutely piteous. And once again, it's another one of those things that I believe has to change immediately. Will it? I have no idea. I don't have any idea at all. Speaking of information that is really nobody's business, although it is, because once again, when it comes to Paul Pelosi and his attack, Nancy Pelosi said that the reason that Paul Pelosi was attacked was because of all the rhetoric and so on and so forth against the Pelosi family, ignoring the fact that someone actually tried to kill a Supreme Court justice based on Democrat spillage of all that and ridiculous statements. You know, seriously. A new NBC Bay Area report about the assault on Paul Pelosi last month includes several of the same details in the NBC News story that was retracted by NBC News. These details suggest that Pelosi may not have been in immediate danger when the police arrived prior to his attack. NBC News correspondent Miguel Almaguer reported on November 4th for Today that the police didn't know they were responding to the Pelosi residence. Pelosi opened the door for the police but did not attempt to escape or declare an emergency and walked away from law enforcement and toward his eventual attacker. Almaguer's report was erased from all NBC News platforms later in the day. It was scrubbed from social media. NBC News issued an editor's note on the website reading, "This piece has been removed from publication because it did not meet NBC News reporting standards." What standards are those? Where you don't report any embarrassing information at all on the Democrat Speaker of the House, but report everything possible that's embarrassing on any Republicans? Is that the standard? Of course, NBC won't say. And I ask, why not? Why won't they say? I mean, it's not like everybody in the world doesn't understand that NBC is a Democrat organization and basically a stenographer for the Democrat National Committee. Well, really, what are you hiding? The answer is nothing. Absolutely nothing. This is the Wells Report. We'll be back with more coming up in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number 817-379-2172. 817-379-2172. Looking forward to hearing from you if you feel like it. The chat room going along beautifully today. Thanks very much for all of that. So we were just talking about this Pelosi attack report done by the local NBC affiliate in San Francisco. They call themselves NBC Bay Area. It's pretty explosive. Now remember, we just talked about how NBC had the report and then backed off on it. So last Friday, exactly 1 week after Almaguer's report, NBC's reporter Almaguer's report was mysteriously retracted with little public detail. NBC's San Francisco local affiliate KNTV, branded as NBC Bay Area, aired an explosive report with highly similar details, indicating Pelosi opened the door for police, did not immediately attempt to escape. Anchor Jessica Aguirre told viewers that NBC Bay Area investigators looked into why state and federal prosecutors each describe one specific detail of the police response differently before tossing it to reporter Bigad Shaban. It all has to do with the moments, seconds really, but just before Paul Pelosi was struck in the head with a hammer inside his San Francisco home. Now, there continues to be contradicting accounts of a relatively simple question, said Shaban. Who opened the door that night when San Francisco police arrived at the Pelosi house? Shaban explained that a federal indictment indicates that two officers opened the door, but San Francisco District Attorney's Office previously stated Mr. Pelosi opened the door with his left hand. Shaban then cited a source familiar with the investigation who personally watched the police body cam footage from that night. Officers knocked on the door of the Pelosi home, then backed away. The video clearly shows Paul Pelosi opened the door with his left hand. The body cam video shows officers having a brief conversation with Pelosi and David DePape before DePape started beating Pelosi with a hammer. We reached out to the Department of Justice for an explanation of its differing account of this seemingly innocuous issue of who opened the door, but so far we haven't heard back. Let's see. The Department of Justice has not responded. The local NBC reporter also spoke with then interim San Francisco District Attorney Brooke Jenkins. Shaban asked, were you able to shed any light as to why Paul Pelosi didn't run out of the house towards police officers when he was able to actually open the door for them when they arrived? Jenkins responded by saying it's not fair to play Monday morning quarterback when analyzing how a victim responded to a crime. But the crime hadn't been committed yet when the door opened. NBC News refused to explain their standards that were violated by the November 4th story. Almaguer has not appeared on the air since his report was removed. The report was accused in some corners of fueling purported conspiracy theories about the true timeline of events that led to suspect David DePape allegedly brutally assaulting Pelosi with a hammer. Some NBC insiders believe the report was squashed because it went against the mainstream narrative. Another NBC insider told Fox News Digital the word inside the company is that a biased source was used by Almaguer. Biased against Pelosi? In San Francisco? Another insider said it was embarrassing for Almaguer's story to follow a conspiracy theory. All you have to do is watch the body camera footage from the police officers. That's all you got to do. Shaban did not immediately respond when he was asked if his reporting backs up the retracted NBC report. NBC Bay Area did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Neither did NBC. Yeah. NBC's silence on the matter speaks volumes. NBC owes it to its audience to be truthful and not participate in a cover-up. I would agree. This is the Wells Report. Thanks for being here. Back with more coming up in just a moment. This is the Wells Report. Greetings. My name is John David Wells. We bring you the news, especially when it's cool. And yesterday, I was up very, very, very late. Why? Well, I was up so late yesterday. Well, I'm glad you asked. I watched the launch of Artemis 1, and I was thrilled. And so what I thought I would do is I thought that I would share that amazing video with you. Check this out. Like I said, we like to report stuff that's cool.
Sound suppressor water now flowing under the ML. And here we go.
10.
Hydrogen burn-off igniters initiated. 7, 6, 5. Core stage engine start. 3, 2, 1. Boosters in ignition. And liftoff of Artemis 1. We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
Listen to that thing.
Five engines on the core stage and 2 solid rocket boosters now propelling the vehicle at 128 miles per hour.
From 0 to 128 miles an hour in about 2 seconds.
Hearing good control on the roll from teams in Mission Control Houston. All good calls so far. Now 30 seconds into the flight of Artemis 1. First milestone will be for the vehicle to pass through max Q at about 1 minute and 9 seconds into launch. This is the greatest period of atmospheric force on the rocket.
That's called max Q. Listen to that thing.
SLS now traveling 607 miles per hour.
607 miles an hour. Phew.
You're looking at 8.8 million pounds of maximum thrust. Quiet here in the loops in Mission Control.
Most of the noise is from the SRBs.
Throttling down ahead of passing through max Q.
And that incredibly long flame trail. That's new.
Now 1 minute, 21 seconds into the flight, traveling at 1,420 miles per hour. The 4 core stage engines are back at maximum thrust. The next major milestone will be for the solid rocket boosters to cut off and jettison at about 2 minutes and 11 seconds into the flight, so about 30 seconds from now. Again, quiet here in Mission Control Houston as teams continue monitoring the flight of Artemis 1. We're now 16 miles downrange from the launch pad at Kennedy Space Center, traveling over 2,800 miles per hour.
Wow.
Standing by for solid rocket booster jettison and shortly thereafter.
And so the SRBs go.
Confirmation that the solid rocket boosters have separated these 177-foot boosters. Now the core stage continues to power the flight of Orion, all 4 RS-25 engines firing, traveling over 3,400 miles per hour, 46 miles downrange.
Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable. It was an American triumph, and it was beautiful to watch. It was absolutely beautiful to watch. And I stayed up and watched as much as I possibly could. The coverage goes like this from USA Today. 50 years after the last astronaut left the moon, the United States is preparing to return to the lunar surface with the successful launch of Artemis 1 today, a new rocket that is the most powerful in the world, more than 8 million pounds of thrust. And boy, that thing got off the pad fast and really accelerated quickly. That is because this is not necessarily a full load for the SLS, the Space Launch System. The lander that's going to be on top of this rocket, the lander I was reading today is very, very big. So big, in fact, that astronauts will very likely have to use something akin to an elevator to get to the lunar surface. Okay, I mean, it's I can't remember whether it was 16 stories tall or 13 stories tall. So that thing just leapt right off the pad and accelerated to thousands of miles an hour, faster than your car can hit 100. I mean, it's unbelievable. So Artemis 1 lifted off at 1:47 a.m. Eastern Time. 4 previous launch attempts were delayed, twice by mechanical issues and twice by weather. Artemis 1 will not land on the moon. It will circle it and then safely return to the Earth if all goes well. The second Artemis mission, with a crew of 4, will fly around the moon in 2024 without landing, although Bill Nelson, who is the current NASA administrator, is wondering why it's going to take so long to be able to get the Artemis 2 mission off the pad. It may be sped up, but I don't know. 2024, that's a long time to wait. Third mission will put astronauts on the moon a year or 2 later. So I don't know why they're taking their time, but I'm sure they have good reasons. The 4 to 6 week flight will test NASA's Space Launch System, the SLS, a super heavy launch vehicle with 15% more thrust than the iconic Saturn V of the manned Apollo missions. Talking about the solid rocket boosters on each side, those are much bigger than the ones they used on the space shuttle. and the thing about it is, most of the noise that you heard was from those SRBs, because the RD-25 engines that powered the space shuttle, they more howl than roar. It's an amazing sound. It's hard to describe, but I don't know that we'll ever hear that, but those solid rocket boosters make a lot of noise. The SLS will carry the Orion spacecraft, a larger, more complex successor to the Apollo spacecraft. The spacecraft will travel 280,000 miles from Earth, flying farther away than any craft ever built for human beings, according to NASA. Unlike SpaceX and Blue Origin, the SLS rocket cannot land or be reused. This is an expendable launcher, which is a pity because those engines are magnificent. The SLS is designed to use all of its power to send cargo to the moon. It does not carry extra fuel or have the propulsion systems necessary to return to the Earth. In the long-awaited and ambitious mission, Orion engineers will test solar panel arrays that worked beautifully today, and rocket operations, and deploy 10 shoebox-sized satellites called CubeSats that will conduct experiments, including 2 that will circle the moon in search of lunar ice. That, by the way, is a precursor to what's going to be happening in further missions because of the orbital dynamics of what will be happening when the Artemis crews actually land. They're not going to be landing on the part of the moon that we can see easily. They're going to be landing on the South Pole. And so what will happen is that there will be satellites, communication satellites, orbiting the moon that will be accessed by the Artemis crews to be able to communicate with the Earth when they are in situations where they normally wouldn't be able to do so. For example, when they land on the far side of the moon, as the Chinese did, by the way, they did a great job with their lander, landing on what is a much more challenging landing area than those big gray patches that we see on the moon that give the moon the man in the moon look. Those great big gray patches are relatively smooth in comparison. The backside of the moon is pummeled by impacts of meteors in a far greater way than the inside part. And so, because actually the moon always faces the same face of the moon, although it wobbles in a small circle, always faces the Earth. And so in order for an asteroid to hit it, it would have to be inside the arc of the lunar orbit. So that's why the outside part of the moon is much more rugged. But sooner or later, Artemis crews will be on the far side of the moon, and they will rely on those satellites for communications because you can't transmit through the moon. The long-awaited ambitious mission, Orion engineers will test solar power arrays, rocket operations, and deploy the 10 shoebox-sized satellites. Artemis is named for the goddess Artemis, the twin sister of Apollo in Greek mythology. That is kind of cool. In the second Artemis mission, the Orion crew module will carry 4 astronauts, one more than Apollo's command module. Orion will have 50% more interior cubic space, which gives each occupant about 9 more cubic feet than those of Apollo. Although the actual, it's interesting. The Apollo spacecraft was designed in an age where engineers used slide rules to work out the mathematics. The Orion capsule was built by computers and it is virtually indistinguishable from the same angles and engineering that was used in the Apollo spacecraft. It's truly amazing. The fifth last manned mission to the moon was Apollo 17, which was launched December 7th, 1972. Commander Gene Cernan and lunar module pilot Harrison Schmitt spent 22 hours on the lunar surface. From launch to splashdown, the Apollo 17 mission lasted 12 days, 13 hours, 52 minutes, much shorter than the Artemis mission's estimated duration of 26 to 42 days. This thing's going to be up there for a while. The purpose of sending an unpiloted spacecraft on a 1.3 million mile journey around the moon and back is to test the ship's propulsion, navigation systems in actual spaceflight, and not to mention crew safety. Orion's life support systems will also be Orion's life support systems will also be tested, though humans will not be aboard. Human figures are. NASA put a mannequin wearing an orange survival suit in the commander's chair. That's actually the spacesuit in case they have to get out of the vehicle, have to get out of the capsule after it splashes down so they can be seen in the ocean. The mannequin was in the commander's chair. There were weights attached to the seat mounts to simulate the same load. Other identical mannequin torsos wearing radiation vests will be in adjacent chairs to track radiation levels. That's a big deal. We are protected because of the Van Allen radiation belts, which are basically electromagnetic energy that intercepts all kinds of bad things coming from the sun and filters them out before the atmosphere of our Earth does virtually the same thing. So there are a lot of things that have to get together for one of these planets out in the middle of nowhere to be able to protect itself from their own sun. Let's see what else. The orbital dynamics are amazing. They are much more difficult than the Apollo orbital mechanics, and so that is the basic story. And by the way, you can watch live coverage, which is something that I was hoping that would be more comprehensive. You can see these things on the NASA channel. It used to be called NASA Select, and they would just run the mission control cameras 24/7, 365 during other missions. And I wish they would do the same thing, but I don't know that that's going to be the case. So let's talk a little bit about some of the pictures that we got to see from Orion. There are television cameras all over it, and the pictures are just plain, frankly, beautiful. They truly are. There's one that shows what I believe to be part of the backside of the spacecraft. Let me see if I can get some other ones. Let's see here. I think that's probably going to show us a commercial first. And if so, yeah, that's going to show us a commercial first. I'll take that off of there so that Facebook doesn't get all annoyed and so on. But what we'll do here is go back to this and try to get ourselves, let me see if I can make that bigger so you can see it. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Goodness gracious sakes alivey. If I could just get rid of this commercial. And I'll show you something as soon as it's going and going and going and going. Please, by all means, stop. Okay, looks like it stopped. And let's see. Oh, it stopped because the computer stopped. That's always nice. Come on. Show it to me. So I want you to see this. This is really cool. That's the wrong thing I want. I don't want to see that. I want to see this. Okay, let's see if I can get that up there. Oh, there we go. All right, so here are some of the pictures. You can see the rocket is, the actual engine is firing there. And here are some other pictures of it. I was struck by the beauty of the photography in this and how much it resembled a very old science fiction movie, 2001: A Space Odyssey, that came out in 1968. Stanley Kubrick did a great job in creating many of these very same looks as they scroll through the pictures that we see. These pictures, by the way, are from cameras that are mounted on the actual solar arrays of the spacecraft. And like I said, they're very, very cool. So the Orion spacecraft is up there. And Artemis 1, the mission is going along as we speak. And so there you go, from a standpoint of what you may have missed had you not been a spacehead like me. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Thanks for being a part of our show. And thank you for taking part in all the things that we bring you on this broadcast. It means a lot to me. Thank you. We'll be back with more coming up in just a couple of seconds as we finish up today's broadcast. Hope you've enjoyed it. We've covered a lot of ground today. And by the way, Scott's there's news about control of the United States House of Representatives. It appears as though Sean Spicer is reporting that the 218th seat has been won by Republicans. I'll check on it and get right back to you. This is the Wells Report. My name is John David Wells. Telephone number 817-379-2172. I did not break it, Gary. I didn't break it. I just hit the wrong spot at the wrong time. Yeah. Sooner or later, I'll be able to get that fixed. That's what I'm going to do. So I wasn't able to find, it was really interesting. Sean Spicer, who was the former press secretary under President Trump, reported that there was a seat announced for control of the House of Representatives by the Republicans. I went through every news site that I had. Started with Associated Press, and I just went on down the line, ABC, CBS, NBC, blah, 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 blah. Nobody's saying a word. Nobody is saying a word on that. All I can tell you is that I chose Fox News last, and they're not saying a word about it. So it may have already happened. Stay tuned. And if that does indeed happen today, I will report it tomorrow on tomorrow's version of the Wells Report. I've said on this broadcast on many occasions that the only thing worse than a politician in Washington is a lame duck politician in Washington. And there is going to be a lame duck Congress, and it will be more lame than others, or lamer if you choose, because the possible Republican control of Congress. And so they're going to try to pass everything they possibly can, including the kitchen sink. And by the way, one of those things that they're trying to pass, even though fiscal issues will be front and center, this, by the way, from the Brookings Institute, several other legislative items will remain ripe for further action. Reports include that one such measure to codify federal recognition of same-sex marriages was voted on and passed in the United States Senate. The House passed a similar bill prior to the elections. Other priorities include reforms to the Electoral Count Act, additional aid to Ukraine, funding for fighting the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, extending in expiring tax provisions. One item that is especially likely to move and perhaps carried along with some other provisions is the National Defense Authorization Act. The annual defense policy bill is seen as a must-pass measure, but as a result, it can end up bearing political conflicts to slow down its progress. Regarding the Respect for Marriage Act, the Senate advanced legislation that would provide federal protections for same-sex and interracial marriages, endorsing the measure in a bipartisan vote that moves it closer to becoming law. The 62-37 vote was a crucial test of support for the bill, called the Respect for Marriage Act, with the backing of 12 Republican members. The Senate easily cleared the 60-vote procedural hurdle needed to move the legislation forward. Drafters of the plan were optimistic it would garner enough backing from the GOP after a bipartisan group of senators made changes to the bill to protect religious liberty. By the way, the Republicans who voted to advance the bill were Roy Blunt of Missouri. He is retiring. Richard Burr of North Carolina, Shelley Moore Capito of West Virginia, Susan Collins of Maine, Joni Ernst of Iowa, Cynthia Loomis of Wyoming, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, Rob Portman of Ohio, Mitt Romney of Utah, Dan Sullivan of Alaska, Tom Tillis of North Carolina, Todd Young of Indiana. Shortly after the 5 senators involved in negotiations over the legislation unveiled their amendment on Monday, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer moved to set up the Wednesday procedural vote. Clearing the 60-vote threshold allows debate to start on the measure and puts the legislation closer to final passage. And this is one of those weird things about the Senate. The Senate is, well, it's arcane. They have to do a lot of things to get a bill passed. And this, by the way, just opens debate. At the end of the debate, there will be a cloture vote, which will close off debate. And then this bill, because it will go to a reconciliation committee where they will compare the House and Senate versions, come up with a bill. They will go back to both chambers for one last vote, and then it'll end up on President Biden's desk before the end of the year, along with a whole bunch of other things, too. The Democrats are going to lose complete control of the American government, which, by the way, it makes no difference whatsoever what party you're a part of. The government does best when the leadership is split. It absolutely is. And that statement is made because when the Republicans have complete control of Congress, they don't do anything either. I mean, seriously, they just don't do anything. They don't move forward with what they need to move forward with. And they keep doing it over and over and over again. That's why all these people worried about the red wave and worried about Republican control and how we can actually get our country back from this evil Democrat Biden thing, which is me being sarcastic. All I can say is that the Republicans make a brave noise. But when it comes down to actually doing something, not so much. Yeah, not so much. Let's see, how many new laws and how much more spending do we really need? Well, until the Democrats run out of time, and I'm only saying that not as a partisan statement. They run the government right now. they're going to do everything they possibly can to get some of this stuff done before the end of the next congressional session, because a new Congress will sit down and start working in perhaps a different way. And you have to say perhaps because the Republicans will be running the show. They will be doing this perhaps in a different way when they take their seats January 3rd. That is if indeed Sean Spicer is correct, with 218 seats belonging to the Republicans. It's not official. It's unconfirmed. I'll keep looking. See you tomorrow for another edition of the Wells Report. Thanks for joining us today. And there you go. And that's a wrap. Let's see. Toodles, says Anhoy Guzman. Thank you. I'm glad I came across this broadcast. Been enjoyable. Me too, Mark Greer. Thanks very much for being a part of our show today. Gary, it's professional wrestling. They're all in it. Yeah. Yeah, and it's scripted. Yeah, I know. Yeah, you're correct. Let's see what else. That's about it. I got work to do. I got work to do. I got work to do. And so do you. But once again, please accept my sincerest thanks for paying attention to the Wells Report today, and we will see you tomorrow.